This is George Dionne of the Rock is George podcast, and this is a KNAC.com exclusive interview with bassist, rhythm guitarist, and keyboardist LINC Bloomfield of the classic rock act KELAKOS. If I knew absolutely nothing about KELAKOS, how would you describe the band's music to me?
Okay. What you have are three guys who got together on the South Shore of Massachusetts in the late 60s in high school. One of them came from Seattle and kind of lit the fuse, Mark Sisson. And suddenly there were bands and Battle of the Bands and concerts on the town common and all kinds of things. And we couldn't wait to get in and see people play, at the Boston Tea Party and some of these concerts in New England. Carl Kennedy grew up in upstate New York. He's a drummer, more heavier influences. But look, all of our musical passion comes from kind of that whole spectrum that comes from the Beatles and all those great singing bands that had melodies and great voices. We never let go of that, but all the way to Hendrix and, Woodstock and the hard driving bands, a lot of guitar. If that didn't exist, I don't think we'd be doing it. It's just, we had to be part of that.
KELAKOS has a new album out. It's their first in 45 years. It's called Hurtling Towards Extinction. It came out on December 1st through Deco Entertainment. Before I get to the album, I kind of want to stay with the history of the band back to 1968, where you were coming out of Cohasset. From what I understand, that you guys used to haul your equipment around in the ice cream trucks. That was your part-time job on the side?
Well, you know how hard we all worked as 17-year-old kids, hustling for whatever we could. So we broke into two branches. We had a different drummer, Nate Murray, was a great guy, and we all got ice cream trucks. So two in Cohasset, two in Marshfield, which is closer to Plymouth. And it rained the entire month of June. Meanwhile, we hustled up to Nantasket Beach, which had a great famous Coney Island-like amusement park with a huge wooden roller coaster. I always thought it was going to go off the rails at Paragon Park. And in the middle of the park was a dive called the Blue Bunny. And that's where the people who wanted to go drink booze on a 100-degree day instead of be with the kids were in the Blue Bunny. So we went and we made a deal with the manager to be the house band one summer. And we had to get our equipment there Friday night, Saturday night, and play Sunday afternoon, which means you're on the beach in Marshfield and you need to know exactly when to stop serving ice cream on the beach and hightail it all the way to Paragon Park for a 2:30 gig. We used the trucks to carry the equipment.
After high school, you guys made your way up to Boston. You were all going to college up in the area, different colleges, but you still stayed together. You teamed up with talent agent Frank Neer, who's actually a prominent realtor still in Cohasset. So how did Frank and you guys get together and started making these gigs throughout Boston?
Well, we were in college, so we weren't able to focus on a professional career for the band. We changed our name to the Criminals. And I'll admit for the first time that the thought behind that was not that we were committing crimes, but that we felt our parents probably thought it was a disaster that, here you are going to college, but you're doing this and we're playing in all kinds of dives. And so we felt, okay, we're really being criminals here. Frank Neer was a star talent guy. He drove all over New England. He was booking Bob Seger and all these college gigs. He was really a phenomenal booking agent, and he was nice enough to give us a push and give us some gigs and some publicity. So, and he's always been good at what he does. So he's a great realtor now in Cohasset.
And you guys took on Carl Kennedy as a drummer. He was from the New York area. How did you guys come about teaming up with Carl Kennedy for the drum position?
Well, Carl's an interesting story. He always wanted to play drums. He tells his own story about that. But he made some money working with some kind of a band and decided to look for a harder rock group, somebody who really wanted to play original music, get in the studio. That's what he wanted to do, just as what we did. So he went out apparently to California for a while. He was in a few different locations, came to Boston, was playing with a band. He talks about it. I don't know these folks. The lead guy was a big egotist who he didn't have much time for. The band itself were all pros out of Berklee School of Music and other great backgrounds. They were highly professional. And he says he learned a lot playing with them, but it wasn't going into the studio. It wasn't about making, 60s and 70s pop music. This is 75. So we went and saw him. I knew I was the bass player. I knew he had what it took. This guy is a real drummer. He's really good. So we really leaned on him and said, give it a shot, try it out. And he moved in with us at Kingston, and we started playing Billy Cobham and everything from Stevie Wonder to and everything in between, and playing locally. And then we moved to New Jersey for a year to get closer to New York City Metro. And the funny thing about that is, I mean, our path would have been, sort of Neil Young, CSNY, Clapton, all some heavier things. And yet disco hit New York just when we moved to Jersey. And so you couldn't even get on stage without a polyester shirt and, with mirror balls spinning. And we played all that music. It's good music. George and I had a lot of fun. George Habistro, the lead singer. I was the second singer. But after a year, we said, this isn't quite what we need. We moved up near Carl's terrain up in upstate New York. And there you had Pyramid Sound, which is a studio in Ithaca. We lived in Ithaca, and we did a lot of gigs there. And we paid a lot of dues, but the whole point was, how do we get in the studio? We were writing songs on the side. And when we got in, we did, I think, 15 different songs that were all over the map, according to the critics. It wasn't a sales pitch that said, 8 songs that sound identical. It was 15 totally different songs with everything from violins to horns to vibes to guest keyboardists and different styles. And that's what we wanted to do.
You mentioned Pyramid Studios. That's where you guys recorded your first album back in it was released in 1978. It's called Gone Are the Days. What do you remember about getting into the studio and recording this album as young kids?
Well, we were nervous because it costs a lot and we didn't understand what all those dials were behind the glass. And you get into where the engineers are, and the giant speakers are there. It sounds great. What's not to love? So you have no judgment. You don't know what you're listening to. And then things start to happen, and you have I say this now, no technique at all. Like if you tell me now we're going to build a song, I've got a studio in my house. I've made a lot of records, and I have a whole architecture of how do I build a song? How do I get kick drum tracks, snare sounds, vocals, backgrounds, horns? They all have a lot of technique. We didn't have it. We just knew that it was kind of our Beatles' White Album. We thought we'd just go for whatever we ever dreamed of. Let's do it. And you kind of hear that in the record. It's very ambitious. George sang amazingly. I didn't sing amazingly, but I got a couple of vocals in, but wrote a bunch of other songs. Carl was amazing. Mark was terrific. He was the rhythm guitar player for the first album. He switched now to a pedal steel and lap steel. But yeah, we were just ambitious. We loved the music. All we cared about was getting it out there so people could hear it.
Did you have a producer? Is that why? Did you not have a producer? Is that why things were kind of foreign in the studio?
We did not have a manager or a producer. The kind of we always were like a horse that wouldn't take a saddle. It's like every time someone in New Jersey or they tried to manage us, we'd go along with it for a little bit and then forget it. George in particular, the lead singer, lead guitarist, his family name is KELAKOS. He's a wild animal. You can't manage George. You have to let him be himself, kind of a Greek god, and very charismatic, incredible talent. And so we thought we could do it ourselves. I mean, probably not the best business decision, but I look back on that, and we remixed it in 2015 and released it the way it should sound. And I'd rather have it that way than have somebody kind of channel it down, cut some songs, and have everything sound the same, just so that the music industry would know where to put us.
I know the band disbanded shortly after the release of the album. Did you guys have a chance to tour outside of New York supporting the album?
I went right into graduate school because that's when it was time to start. And I'd been out for 4 years, and I kind of had a longer term view of what I should be doing with my life. And the guys did continue with the bass player. They did television. They did, Pennsylvania, New York, the whole area. They promoted it for a while, and then they decided to go in their separate directions. And they all stayed in music. But Carl started producing some really interesting acts, Anthrax, Excited. I don't know all the names, but you would. He made a name for himself as kind of a producer in the 80s. And then the Rods, which is his 3-man metal band, started, and they have had decades of success. They have a new album coming out in January. Great video that's circulating, Rattle the Cage. So terrific success. They're going to Australia in 2024 for a metal tour. So he's done great. And what's fun about that is, you know, we pull Carl back into the songwriting, singing, you know, vibe, and we make him play beats that he'll never play on the Rods. And he does it. And he does some amazing, beautiful drum tracks on our album.
I actually talked to Carl last week about the latest Rods album.
That's great. Well, I wish them every success. People should check out their new album. It's going to be great.
So when the band breaks up, Carl gets into producing and he forms the Rods. George goes on, still does some music on the side. Mark, I believe he builds instruments. You got into politics and national security, kind of a big shift in career, I would say.
It was, but let's not skip over George. He moved back to Cohasset for a while, and he was packing them into the local clubs there with an acoustic guitar, singing. He and I got together in '83 and '84, and I'm trying to figure out if we can release an album where I went. My sister was getting married in Cohasset, so I came home. I had acoustic guitar, and I kept running over to a barn where George had a whole setup with reel to reel, and he had written eight or nine songs, and I would learn them and then sing harmony and play the second guitar. And we have that recording. It's really cool, two acoustic guitars, but he's such a good songwriter and singer. But he then, you know, went down to Florida. I won't tell you where, but he had a whole spread where he went off the grid, and he's written hundreds of songs privately. And so he and I have been swapping music. We also recorded some songs in Boston at Soundtrack Studios, which is not there anymore. It's near TD Garden. And there's some really good tracks, but we couldn't find the tapes. When, you know, in 2015, I said, okay, where are those tapes? Let me remix them. Couldn't find them. They were probably gone. So one of those songs that we did is Downhill Slide, and we did a whole new version of it on this album with a coda at the end, which is brand new. And the piano behind me is the one that you hear at the end. So he's really stayed with his music. My background, I mean, I grew up in a house that was all about international security. My dad was a professor at MIT and wrote 14 books. We served in World War II, OSS, you know, State Department. He went back with one of his professor buddies, Zbigniew Brzezinski, worked for a year in the White House. That was his career. I had to get away from that because I have the same name, and everyone was looking at me like, oh, let's see you do the Macarena. Let's see how good you are. And I felt very much like I had to go off and establish myself. So I came to Washington and got in government, and off and on worked in 5 administrations, and that was really, I think, what I was born to do. My mother came from New Zealand. She was one of 5 daughters of a guy who fought in World War I, came home, became the youngest guy elected Prime Minister of New Zealand. So big political family. He was the Defense Minister of Coordination and died in office in World War II. So I was born to do foreign affairs and international security, war and peace, prevent nuclear war. That's kind of my DNA. But the music is the second half of my life.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service in government. I think sometimes politicians don't get their due, or people in your position don't get enough thanks.
Well, thanks for that. I'll extend that to all the people whose names you'll never hear, who work long hours and do it because they took an oath, and they care about the country and they believe in the country. And there's lots of those people that you never hear about.
And you still kept up with music, at least on a hobby sense, while you were still working?
Yeah. So I was hiding it in my basement. You know, we had a baby girl and an apartment, and I'd wait for my wife to go out shopping and then go down and start singing and playing, and reel to reel. Then I went to 8-track reel. Then I went to digital 16-track. Then I finally, what happened in 2003, I had a pretty senior position. I was Assistant Secretary of State under Colin Powell for political military, which is the guy who connects to the Pentagon. And I knew Powell when he was a two-star general 25 years earlier. He was the Secretary of Defense's right-hand military assistant. So he put me in that role. 9/11, Iraq, Afghanistan. It was very busy. It was a lot of work. And one night we're on the Potomac with these East European ambassadors and their spouses. This guy from Slovenia who invented Mr. Coffee was very rich. He built a wing on the Cleveland Clinic, and he would fly in his jet, and his yacht would be waiting for him in all these places. They would invite people. So I'm out on the deck of the boat one August night, and the Hungarian ambassador, András Simoni, says, "I'm forming a rock band. You have to be in it. I know that you play." And I said, I thought to myself, 30 years old was the upper limit when I was doing this. It was 30 years old. You can't get on stage. It's an embarrassment. Too old. And I'm 50 something. And so I just thought, thank you very much. Never going to happen. So then he said, another guy approached me who, a big shot in Washington. He said, no, you got to join. I know you do bass. You sing. Skunk Baxter's going to be in the band. And I was very doubtful that the great Jeff Skunk Baxter, Steely Dan, Doobie Brothers, he's not going to be in a band. But it turns out that Skunk was working for the intelligence community. He's a very patriotic, smart guy, helping them understand the dangers that looking around corners that they weren't seeing. Very, very good guy. And he came to lunch, and in walks the great Skunk Baxter. I congratulated him and thanked him. Great music. He said, no, if I'm in the band, I'm in. I thought, uh-oh, that just changed my whole life, because I'm not going to say no to playing with Skunk Baxter. So about once a year for 20 years, this Coalition of the Willing gets on stage and does a charity event of some kind. We played for the wounded troops at Walter Reed and put on a Hungarian barbecue. And it was really touching. We introduced by Nordy Schwartz, who became the chief of the Air Force. They put it on AFN. We played at a club in New York, the Knitting Factory, with the ambassador to Russia on drums, Sandy Birchbow, and Russian TV filmed it. And it was shown all over Eastern Europe and Russia. So we've had our fun, and raised, I think we've helped people with it. And it became kind of a DC thing. It wasn't about us. It was, we can let our collar down a little bit. We can let our hair down. We can be serious people with security clearances, but then we can go out and have an incredible rock and roll night, and nobody's going to criticize us. And I think that's what we did. So that brought me back.
Back in 2015, KELAKOS was brought back. You released Uncorked, Rare Tracks from a Vintage 70s Band, which is pretty much made up of your debut album, Gone Are Their Days, and some other tracks. How did you guys get back together to put out this particular release?
Drummer Carl Kennedy found the Ampex studio tapes. They were in a lead-lined vault, which kept them, we hoped, in good shape. And so I asked him to go to a nearby studio in Pennsylvania and pay to just run them raw onto digital and send me the hard drives, because Baxter had pushed me into getting Pro Tools. You got to get a real studio. So I did. And I didn't know enough about it. I wrote like a 75-page manual to teach myself, because it's so complicated. It's like flying a 747 if you've never flown a plane. So I had the studio, and all I cared about was, can I make my songs sound a little bit better? Just fiddle around like, and all the tracks were broken apart. It wasn't mixed. And I started doing that about 2013, and I just kept going and going and going. And there's tutorials online you can buy with really, really good techniques for digital. And I just kept going. We did the whole album, and then we said, let's put it out. And we had a great publicist, Chip Ruggieri, who's working with us right now, terrific guy. And he got some reviews, and that's what did it. When we started seeing people like you, George, and critics who say, here, I'm hearing some Allman Brothers here. I'm hearing some 10cc. I'm hearing some this and that. It's just fascinating to have somebody talking about your music. And we got some pretty high praise for the music we did 37 years before. And that got us motivated to say, you know what? I wonder what it would sound like if we did some music today. And and the question is, have these guys, they're so much older, have they slowed down? I mean, is this just going to be an embarrassment? The first song we did was Florida Flash Flood, which for the heavy metal guys, that's the tune you want to listen to first. You can't believe how much energy that had. I didn't think we could keep up with George. I mean, he just rocked it. And then Carl, of course, is probably the only drummer I know who could do that. He came in and jumped in on George's track and put a thunderous kick butt drum track, double kick, just unbelievable. And it was hard, and we all jumped in on it, and that was the first tune. And then we did another, and then another. We didn't have a plan, but I don't know. I guess once you get something going, you think, let's just keep going and see where this leads. And this is where it led.
And it's led us here to 2023, 45 years later from the beginning, from the first album, Hurtling Towards Extinction through Deco Entertainment. Were you guys able to record any parts together, or was this more of a remote thing like a lot of acts do today?
Well, it was more of a remote thing, but I think you have to look at what COVID did to virtual, to what we're doing today. This really wouldn't be possible if it weren't for the pandemic. So much, I'm so connected to people in faraway places now because of that, and the fidelity and the bandwidth and everything's better. And so, yeah, we did it remotely, but it also, the point that's different is we did it very interactively. I mean, it was we were talking into each other's ears. We were really, we weren't playing at the same time, but each of the players, we were able to communicate almost like we were in the same studio together. And you can tell that, and the other point is we played so many gigs in the past that it's almost laugh out loud. Carl would say, just show me a Kelakos song and I know how to finish their sentences musically. I know exactly what to play because we've just spent hundreds of hours playing live a long time ago. And we didn't have to think about the right bass part, the right drum part. It just fell in very naturally.
So with these 12 songs, did you start writing anew after the 2015 re-release, or are these songs that you guys have all collected over the years as songwriters?
Yeah, great question. Both. So, yeah, I think George had a song that he's recorded privately 3 or 4 times that he always wanted to have a nice production called Golden Sun. It's an intimate song. If you want to look at a guy that can play the most raucous rock and roll, and then he can take it all the way down to where you're almost in tears listening to him, that close, that intimate, and that honest. He has that range. For me, there's a song called The Lone Road, and I've been married for a long time, very happily, and still quite happy. But there was a time when you take the experiences you get, and that helps you write songs. So I was dumped by a woman, and that helped me write The Lone Road on an acoustic guitar a long time ago. And I always thought, wonder if we could ever make this sound bigger. And there it is. And I have to tip my cap because Carl Kennedy, he was doing drum tracks, and he sent me one. He said, here it is. And I listened to it, and it was like he did all the things I didn't want him to do. Like he's played places I wanted him to stop. And he said, oh, wait, I sent you the wrong track. Here's another one. And it was amazing. And that's what you hear on the record. Unbelievable, because he doesn't get to stop and start. He has to have it, and you can't do 25 drum takes. He's got to kind of have it pretty quick. And boy, did he nailed that one. So I'm really happy with The Lone Road. But there's a lot of others that happened very recently, and we put those together, and you build a frame, and I don't know what Mark Sisson's going to do on pedal steel. What do I know? But he'll come up with some amazing ideas. And George, he's not one of these guitar players who sits on his bed playing a riff 500 times, to get it just so in the studio. He closes his eyes, he plays the music, and you get what he's feeling right now. It's real. It's like Bob Marley. It's just, he's a real musician. So I get all these different takes, and he says, you tell me what you like. And so I'll put different combinations together, and that's what you hear. It's all spontaneous. And I want to keep the personality. It won't please everybody, but if you like it, you'll love it. It's kind of my attitude toward, let's leave it all in there. Let's let it hang out.
One of the songs you wrote, you actually got Carl to sing on it. Play It Like You Mean It. Carl doesn't sing too often.
Yeah, I had to beg him. I won't tell you how many months it took to get him to do that, and how many different times I broke up the song into pieces and sang parts in his ear. And then he did it. And he, Carl's very modest. He doesn't sing lead, hadn't done it in a long time. And he just had low expectations, but I'm proud of my ability to take someone like that and make him a star. That's my little ability. If you sing for me, George, I'll give you a lead vocal that you won't, that'll make you proud. It's kind of my promise. And that's what we did. He sang this. He has a lot of character in his voice, and he has personality, and he has charm, and he sang it really well. And so we just built the song around it. And that video, Play It Like You Mean It, is still going up 2,000-3,000 views a day. It's, people are enjoying it, and I hope they'll check it out.
Now, I noticed that your wife, Diana, actually wrote a song on this album with Mark, See Me Go. Is she someone in the industry, or is it just kind of something that happened by chance?
Well, actually, she's not my wife. She's my kid sister, Daisy,
Oh,
a Cohasset girl.
okay.
Yeah. And so, which is fun, is that Mark and Di knew each other way back when, and when you see someone later in life, but you knew them as a teenager and a rock star, that kind of magic brought them together. They were friends before that. I knew they were going to concerts on the West Coast. I think she went up to Seattle. They went and they saw some. They're in Central California. So they were going to, and then Mark sent me a tape. He said, "Hey, the guy, we wrote a song." And I listened to it, and there was one thing in there that I knew was kind of a hook, a magical, I'm just looking like, that is really cool. So I said, let's build this out. Let's do it. And I never told him what it was, because it would have, I think, he would have been too self-conscious singing the part that was good. So he just sang it. And like I said, he's never sung lead on a record before. And he sang a great vocal, just like Carl. And she wrote the lyrics. And so See Me Go is a fun song. I've gotten some great feedback on that. And we'll do a video eventually. But so I'm and then they got married last May in Cohasset. So we were there. And it was just really nice, because Mark's sister's family all came in from everywhere, and we had people from my family, and it was really a nice event. And so we're very happy for them.
One of my favorite tracks on the album, I believe it's the closing track, Where Magic Grows. It's kind of your take on where humanity is kind of going right now. It seems very topical, if you want to talk a little bit about that song.
Well, I love to have people listen to the music and tell me what it means to them. It really is something that is supposed to inspire your own emotions and all that. And be honest, unlike Bob Dylan and some of the great lyricists, I write because I like the way it sounds. I'm a very shut your eyes, that just the way music feels and sounds to me is why I do it. So I had some musical ideas that I wanted to package together. Like there's an ending part, which is sort of an arena type chorus, which I had, and I had some verses that I wanted to play. And so I put it all together. And then with Carl, I wanted to do kind of a world beat, because I've been hanging out a little bit in the Middle East, and they have this kind of Beirut kind of dance beat. So that goes into the verses. And then I figured, why don't we remember how the Beatles used to have Paul McCartney would be the happy guy, try to see it my way, we can work it out. And then Lennon would come in and say, life is very short and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend. It was sort of the negative, hard reality. So I wanted to bring George in on the environmental subject and say, Mother Nature calls the shots, human nature makes her mad. And it's pretty negative. I am very concerned. I look at the disasters, the fires in California, the floods in Florida, and stuff around the world. I mean, you see these old towns in Germany where the whole place is getting washed out. There's, the ice caps are melting. It worries me. I'm involved in a lot of stuff, technologies and whatnot too. We have 2 electric cars at our house and a charging station. So we're trying to do more. I don't want to leave the world worse off. So this song just asks a question. It doesn't tell you anything. It says, okay, you think about it. Will magic save us? I'm the believer, and George is the one that says, this is really bad. Watch out. And if you listen to the song, wait till we do a video of it. It should be very graphic about where the environmental situation is going.
Hurtling Towards Extinction is released through Deco Entertainment. How did you get the deal with Deco?
It was very fortunate working with Chip Ruggieri at Chipster PR. He knew the folks at Deco, which is a Warner Music Group, sort of indie independent label. They're terrific people. They really support their artists. So when Chip sent them the songs, his contacts listened to it and got back and said, "Hey, this is pretty cool. Yeah, let's work with that." And to us, that was unbelievable. You know, now you've got a Warner Music Group record label working for you, and they've been great. We're having fun with it. They certainly know how to do things that I don't know how to do, and we're just grateful to have an amazing team of folks. We have a social media person in Michigan, a great web designer, Lillian Temmer in Chicago. We've got a video team in India, a graphic artist in Belgium, Eric Philippe, who is world class, and the guys at Chipster and also at Deco, and that's giving us a lift. For us, it really is just like a kite. How high can we get the music out there? Can we get it on playlists? Will people listen to it? Will they talk about it? I like this song. I don't like that song. Fine, but just play the music and see what you think. That's all we want.
Equally important to the music when it comes to new records is the cover art and the packaging. And you mentioned Eric's work. I believe the front of the album is sort of the future and the back is the past. You guys, your first PR photo at the Mayflower in Plymouth, Massachusetts.
That's right. So I think George and I were kind of figured we wanted to have the back was going to be the Mayflower, the beginning of the voyage. And the front is our spaceship, going through the cosmos. And you see a little bit of that at the beginning of the video of Play It Like You Mean It. We're inside the spaceship. And you see a couple of real guitars that we use, one that George built on the right and a 60th anniversary Fender custom shop 54 Strat, which is a really great guitar. It looks like a bear clawed it to death. Unbelievable sound. And one of Carl's signature drum. Carl has his own signature brand drum. And then there's a pedal steel hiding on the floor. But we wanted to make our own little spaceship and show that we've gone from the past to the future and ask people, where are we headed?
What are the chances of you guys getting together for a couple of live performances?
It wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't be expected. But we have a new policy, George, which is never say never. So the question is out there. It would be a task to pull people together and do rehearsing and get a show. And I'd have extra musicians in there too, because there's so many parts. But I'm not saying never.
Do you work on any other musical projects besides kind of working with George on recordings? Do you do anything else music wise, whether it be producing or performing?
Well, a couple of things. I have my own, never heard of it, solo label, LB Junior, because I'm Lincoln Junior. And I've actually pulled back things from release because I want to put out a solo record when all this has been promoted. I'll work on finishing that. Just some things that I've done on my own. So a little bit softer, more acoustic, but also electric. But I'm the lead guitarist of my own solo projects. I've also worked with some individuals. This Hungarian ambassador, András Simoni, is a dear friend of mine. He's now an American. He had a memoir. He was behind the Iron Curtain listening to this forbidden music as a kid at night. Traffic was his favorite band. They came to Hungary. He stayed up all night and met them when he was a teenager, showed him around. Years later, he comes to America as the ambassador, and he's got Stevie Winwood in his residence with Wolf Blitzer and with Skunk Baxter and with Terry Phillips, the head of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, and who gave him a platinum record. And I mean, he brought it full circle. He's been on Colbert 3 times. So András wrote a book that was about how this Rockin' to the Free World, how the Stratocaster beat the Kalashnikov. And I thought he needed a song. So I wrote him a song called Waiting on a Train. You could find it on YouTube and a video, but that's him singing. And again, a guy who never sang a record sounds great. I'm proud of the fact that András did a great job on his song. And the same thing with the guy you may have heard of. His musical name is ABLINKEN, as in Abe Lincoln. But his real name is Anthony Blinken. He's our Secretary of State, the most important diplomat in the world right now, and trying to stop a lot of wars. And I thank him all the time for his service. And I don't claim to influence him, but he's a personal friend through music. He's recorded 3 songs that you see on the download services under Abe Linken, and those were recorded in my studio, and I produced them with him. And he's a terrific guy. So I'm happy to take these people who always dreamed of, rock and roll, and now you've got a song that's heard all over the world, and that's you singing. So it's fun to see Carl and Mark and Andras and Secretary Blinken. They're all out there singing their own songs, which just makes me happy.
I'm surprised at the amount of DC politicians that actually are they either play an instrument or they sing or they're in a band. I mean, Mike Huckabee plays the bass and Clinton plays the saxophone. How often do you get to jam with these other guys? Do you get the opportunity?
Probably, but not really. This DC group with Skunk Baxter, who has this solo album that just came out, and so he's touring, and he has not been able to perform with us for a couple of years, but he will. So we perform without him, which is I try to organize things with mostly just DC officials in the band. One was the former Deputy Secretary of Energy, and so we've had that's the DC band. We play about once a year. We played on May 10th at the Renwick Gallery next to the White House. The First Lady came, the UN Secretary General. It was for UN refugees. Kate Blanchett was there. It was amazing to meet her and hear her speak. The great actress was the Special Ambassador for Refugees. And our band played a couple of tunes, and then the Secretary of State got up and played some blues, and then the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee got up and sang a song. So that was a pretty epic night. So we do that about once a year.
If this new KELAKOS album does well, are we going to get new music in the future?
Well, there's nothing like people listening to your music and commenting on it, and no one, you're not going to get everybody to love everything. We know that, but just getting them to listen to it and see if they like something. That all the songs are different. Every one of them is like our baby. There's no filler. So we hope they like something. That's a powerful influence. It certainly makes you think, wow, maybe I have some other songs to offer. So yeah, if you'll get people to listen, we'll think about more music.
Well, it's certainly worth listening to. The latest album is Hurtling Towards Extinction. It's out now through Deco Entertainment. LINC, those are all the questions I have for you today. I want to thank you for speaking with KNAC.com and kind of giving us a little more info on KELAKOS, where they were and where they are.
You did a great job pulling out all the right information. Thank you for that. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you and talk to your listeners. I hope you all have a great day.